Greetings, greetings, greetings. You are now tuned into the vault. Trust Christian own, nothing control everything. Just want to thank you for tuning in live, listening to replay. Always appreciate everybody that tunes in live, listens in the replay. This is the vault, episode 421, fully invested. Definitely looking forward to giving you a power packed episode today. This is Trust Christian own, nothing control everything. Once again, this is the vault, episode 421, fully invested. Just want to thank you for listening live or listening to replay. Always appreciate everybody that tunes in live, listen to replay. Everybody that listens in the replay, they always hear say the same thing right off the beginning is focusing on the listeners and the people that listen live and the people that listen to replay. Always feel free to hit the like and the subscribe button so we can actually build up the channel. Always appreciate everybody that hits the like and the subscribe button. Definitely do that. And we just want to go ahead and, say thank you once again for tuning in live, listening, replay, and hop into this episode as we always do. There's a lot going on in the world, but particularly we're going to talk about being fully invested at this time, what that means, what the mentors have trained us to be. It's interesting because, we just read something even right before this recording, which talked about being proactive, where there are many that may not be proactive, and in turn, that doesn't lead to being fully invested. Being fully invested is being proactive. That's the bottom line. Sure, you can save some ammunition and gunpowder, save some dry powder for another day. So that means that you have at least 8% of your portfolio available to go into something else. Those numbers are slight. We don't hear all of high net worth investors necessarily, being invested to where they're 8% in the free, with free capital. But at the same time, we definitely see investors that are under 100 million, less than 10 million. They're usually going to be fully invested. Fully invested is somebody saying, I have a mortgage on a house, I've paid into the house, so I have equity in the house, so now I'm invested in the house. People are invested into these so-called assets. They're invested into their house. Maybe they're invested into the cars that they have because they have to have insurance on it. Are they fully invested on the business level, or are they fully invested on the personal level? Even when you get into these environments of what would be an investment, just remember, fully invested is paying for the insurance. Fully invested is owning the asset outright. So now you have the car outright. Now you have the house outright. Now you have the diamonds outright. Now you have the pearls outright. Now you have guns outright. Now you have uh, art outright. Fully invested. We're not going to talk about the liability much today or at all. But there can be a downside to be fully invested. But fully invested is a proactive trader's mindset. It is not sitting on your ducks, sitting on your heels. It's almost saying you have a plan B. And so many people say, oh, you need to have a plan A to Z. And then you'll see so many successful say, no, you got to have a plan A and stick to it. Fully invested. This is how you know you're not fully invested. But you can question whether you're fully invested. Here we go. The best gem from the beginning. Well, so many people say they want to be fully invested, but when it comes to their education or paying for a new experience, they may not pay for it. Elite are going to pay for the experience. They're going to pay for the education. They're invested in their education as much as they're educated in what? The money. They're invested in their education and relationships as much as the what? The money. They're invested emotionally to these people. Oh, I thought you can't have emotions in business. Well, you think people don't stick around in business because they have a connection to you? You think it's always going to be about dollar signs? What happens when you get to that level where you have the FU money and you don't need somebody anymore? You paid your dues, as they say, fully invested. Then what about, are you always willing to have capital for your education as a trustee? See, that's the question that a lot of times when people come through the vault, the 1%, the top 5% are going to do their part, fully invested, with or without the vault. We were talking to a trustee recently, and a trustee has horses. They got into a horse racing after they knew us. Horse racing. It's cool. It's great. There's nothing wrong with horse racing. But how many people are about horse racing? Horse racing, you can make actually quite a bit of money. See, when you're fully invested, you can diversify. Oh, see, it's kind of backwards for most people in the public. When you are fully invested, you're almost forced to diversify. But what are you diversifying? Your skill set? What are you diversifying? Your financial mindset? Oh man, get smart quick. I don't know how fast I can learn this stuff. Trust Christian in the vault. Are you fully invested? So many people come to the vault. This is what the mentor says. This is what we say to the trustees. Are you enamored with the information? Now, when we first heard it, we knew that wasn't a good thing. It didn't sound good. It sounded like a slight, which it is. It's when people say, "Oh, I'm so overwhelmed with the private sector. I'm overwhelmed with the UCC stuff. I'm overwhelmed with the secured party creditor stuff. The secured party creditor stuff, that's not really my thing, but I've been into it and it's just not getting me anywhere." Right. It's not getting people anywhere. Okay. Well, let's talk about it. Well, they don't really have much to say about it because the individuals that have come to the vault and spoke to these SPCs and all these different people that talk that rhetoric, what do they say? They say, "Oh, it hasn't gotten me to financial status." Correct, because it's not a financial system. And we share with trustees how businesses use those things every day. But are you fully invested into the information? Oh, it might be overwhelmed. How are you overwhelmed with the information? What information? You got it in your hands, right? Read it. Just read it over until you get it. It's reading and comprehension. We can talk about it from 60,000 feet, but we're going to talk about it from like 25,000 or anything over 1,000 feet scary or 100 feet scary. So, when we're up pretty high, because you're fully invested, that means you're up pretty high. You actually don't have much margin for error when you're that high. You got to come down with a soft landing or things can get ugly. Fully invested. Fully invested looks like, say, okay, there is no plan B. There is no turning back. Turning back to what? Less money than you made today? Fully invested is being able and willing to put up the upfront capital for the returns that are going to come later. Let's say that again. You got to put up the upfront capital. Sometimes it's financial capital, sometimes it's human capital to get a return later. A lot of people, you got to make a point to move in a different direction. You got to make it a point to say, okay, I know there's a better way, and I'm doing it. A lot of times, people might be in the public sector, they might have to invest in the public sector, invest in their companies. What does it look like? Fully invested. It does mean you're to the hill. We like the marketing company. What is it called? Full tilt. Oh, it's definitely full tilt. When you're fully invested, you're full tilt. You're willing to bet it all on one play or two plays and see if you're willing to go for broke. Is it that crazy? Is it that hard of a jump? So let's go back to the classic 60-40, 60 in diverse, 40 in safe fixed income derivatives. This is not financial advice or legal advice, so it's not so much that. That model is going to be there for the companies that are top heavy, have tons of capital, and can utilize the model of, okay, we're going to bet on really the three or four or five or less than 20 companies that really make most of the money of the stock markets. Fully invested. See, this is where our mentors really kicked us in the butt. And they would say, are you invested in people? Sure, we could talk about the money all day, but the mentors ask you that. When they talk about how many lives are you changing? How many lives are you helping? You're actually being an aid in the community. How many? That's what they would say. Now, we're in an era now where maybe that doesn't matter, the merits aren't there, but fully invested for sure. Are you invested in people? They would definitely say that they would stay on that the longest. They'd tell you the most stories about people. We could tell you stories about people. We protect our trustees' privacy, but a lot of times you just gotta respect the trustees' privacy. That's the biggest thing. Sure, we've read over some emails. We haven't named any names, and we just talk about a lot of the things that people reach out to the vault for trustee training or consulting about a public business. So many people don't have basic documents on the public side, so then we get to the private sector. There's so much more education needed. So that's why we do our workshops. That's why we do the classes. That's why we have the trustee training. You can feel free to reach out Christian at trustchristian.com. Once again, that's Christian at trustchristian.com. We get emails all the time. People say, "Oh, is that how you gonna move with it?" Yes. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in live, listening to replay. Uh, fully invested. Fully invested is always gonna look radical because how many people are willing to be fully invested? It's birds of a feather flock together. We're sharing with you. Fully invested is us. The vault, it sure it holds gems, but remember, we're talking about financial property. You're talking about human property, which is relationships, being able to cultivate the relationships in the vault, and not last but not least, what is that? Now you got financial. What is that? Financial. Uh, Relationships and education. There we go. And so, education. So if you're fully invested in the education of the trustee, then there's always a level of learning that you can learn. So if you weren't exposed to something, you didn't know it, but now that you know it, then you could technically say you can learn it once you have a grasp of what is it that somebody is talking to you about, whatever, whatever. But nevertheless, we're talking about intellectual property. Intellectual property is the information that you know, into information that you have. Are you fully invested in that process to have some of the best information out there? A lot of people think you can just Google everything. They fell into that go ahead and Google it trap. That's fine. We definitely not going to knock against Google. Great platform. You can do some basic searches on there. But, at the end of the day, there's more to the world than the basic searches. There are things that are considered private pieces of information just as much as they consider public information. You can go and see that there's a banned book list for the United States and books being sold over the internet to these countries, to the United States, as well as other countries having banned book lists. So these books cannot come in their country. So when you're fully invested in your education, you're diversifying your education set, where not only are you able to leave the jurisdiction you're in to go get this so-called newfound acquired knowledge, it just wasn't given out in the particular jurisdiction that you were trained in or given information in or programmed in. And so now we get into this environment where, okay, all the information is definitely not on the internet. How could someone at this point, oh, we're 20 years into the internet and everything's on the internet? What are you talking about? Some of us are actually older than the internet. So when you say everything's on the internet, it's not. But you have buffoons, these young cum dummies, these people that were born with the internet. I was born with the cell phone. So everything is not on the internet. It doesn't have to be explained that way. It's a fact. So for that reason, there's a public and there's a private. We just sat here and gave a clear example of what public and private looks like. They have a public way that you can buy books, buy information, and there's specific information that's not allowed to be sold through the internet websites. That's a fact. If you think it's not being monitored, for sure, they're not going to be sold in certain countries. Now, y'all know in the States that you can freely get your hands on a lot of books, but there's a banned book list, one, in the States just as well as in other countries. So when you think you're free, how are you freer than someone else that has a banned book list? No, there's no such thing as a banned book list. Whatever. We'll move on. Fully invested. Are you fully invested in the education? Fully invested in the education. The education that is never going to stop. That's a fact. It's never going to stop. It's always going to keep going. Why? It's an education. You're in a field, it's a lifestyle. But are you fully invested into that lifestyle, or is it a gimmick? Is it a write-off? Is it a tactic? Is it a strategy? Is it a vehicle? People fell in love with vehicles. Oh, I fell in love with the LC. I fell in love with the trust. I fell in love with the C Corp. I fell in love with the S Corp. I fell in love with this particular business idea. That's great. Fully invested. People are fully invested when they do that. We used to tell people all the time we didn't believe in savings. The mentor said savings is gold and silver. The mentor said almost art is a savings. If you ever needed money in the public or if you needed liquidity, you have collectibles. But particular, whether it's, yeah, they actually say you're willing to sell art before gold and silver. You're willing to sell cars, clothes, pearls before gold and silver. Platinum, palladium, rhodium. Are you fully invested to hold a stash of assets for the long term, for the forever term? What happens when you have that in your family for generations? It's a signal. It's a signal. It signifies something. It signifies that you were fully invested in the next generation. That's what it signifies. When you have those assets that you can pass along from one generation to the next, it shows that the previous generation was fully invested for the next generation. Why? Because they were a steward of the assets. Oh man, I want to be a trustee. I think my calling is to be a trustee. Oh, my calling is to be a trustee. Your calling is to be a trustee, right? Right. Be it. Be fully invested. How does that look, Trust Christian in the vault? How does that look when I'm starting from no capital? Is it not just no capital? What about knowledge? See, that was a tricky one. Oh man, I'm supposed to be able to make money out of thin air, right? I'm supposed to be able to, create an idea and it's gonna make some money, right? Right? Takes money to make money. Yeah, that could be true. It's true. All right. Well, I gotta have how much shit is the minimum? Well, they say like corporations, maybe in the public, are not expensive. Trusteeship is something through families and things of that nature. Fully invested on the public side is definitely put on some type of promissory note or hard asset to possibly collateralize the company, or going out and some people doing PGs. People don't always want to say you do a PG, but if you had to do a PG, if you did a PG, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not the end of the world, which is a personal guaranteer. But you could always change that. Just going back to the company. Uh, Fully invested is definitely getting behind your idea in such a small way. You could always go to a grand scale where you're going out and you're just raising capital. You're just going to do what all the greats said. All the greats pretty much said they either slept in their car or they slept on the floor. This is the facts. No one's going to tell you in the public that they didn't sleep on the floor, or no one in the public is going to tell you that they slept on the floor. But I promise you guys, 100% fully invested for the most part. There's probably most of the time we can almost say like it's a 50-50 chance they slept on the floor if they made over $1 million in their life. We're not talking about first gen like, or somebody's giving them money. We're actually talking about like they actually went out and worked hard for the money, but there are anomalies. But for the most part, yeah, they slept in their cars. They always tell you, like, they give you some story like, oh, I was homeless. It's like the famous story. I was homeless, but I'm a millionaire now. It's like the famous story of our era. They're fully invested though, for sure. These people would say, oh, I was homeless. I ate out of trash cans. Okay, yeah, you did that by choice, not because you had to. Do you hear the difference, ladies and gentlemen? Some people actually choose that. That's all that is. And when they actually admit that to themselves, that's when they end up saying, yeah, that's when I became a millionaire. I had to choose the life I wanted. I had to choose the things I wanted. Are you fully invested for that? Fully invested. Those are the three KPIs that we want to share with you all that kind of let you all know if you're fully invested, which is your education, which is student mentality, and the second one is your network, making sure your network is proper. When you're fully invested, you're going to events that cater towards your industry. You're seeking events towards your industry. You're seeking to find always a better network or upgrade your network. And when it comes to financial capital, you're definitely willing to back it, put your name on it, quote unquote, PG it, things of that nature. You're willing to back your own idea. It's one of those things where we talk about having a fund, and so many people think like, oh, hedge fund, hedge fund. But in a hedge fund, the asset manager, the head asset manager, or anyone that sit on the board as a head asset manager traditionally has the most money in the fund. So even though they have outside investors and people that are, giving them money, they might be giving them 5, 10, 20 million. They might be giving them, you know, they might give them 50 million. They might give them 100 million. They might get big donors. But in a fund, a hedge fund, even when you talk about like every fund is going to be different. Like angels are different, VCs are different. Um, but even when you look at like let's just go look at a venture capital is so broad nowadays. These people sometimes will buy in 1% all the way up to almost 80 or 90%. Why? Because these companies are going to come in and buy a portion of your company and give you 3 or 4 people to work on staff and build your idea. It's almost like they're an incubator. So when you see a lot of venture capitalists or you see a lot of angel investors, they're willing to give people money They're just going to have someone come sit on the board, or have someone come sit in and be a manager, like a CEO or a CFO. Like, VCs are what Warren Buffett is. They just aren't. They do a lot more nimbler investments. Uh, Whereas Warren, even when you look at Warren Buffett, it's most likely to say Warren Buffett probably hold the most shares in Berkshire Hathaway. He's fully investment. Him and Charlie Munger, it's safe to say, maybe because they have the structure different, like they're obviously the elite, so they have structures that are going to put them in place where they don't have to show that they're fully invested. For the most part, they're for the most part fully invested. It's not that these guys are dumb or anything. These guys are running over a $300 billion hedge fund. I mean, Warren Buffett runs a hedge fund, ladies and gentlemen. It's not like Berkshire Hathaway is not a hedge fund. It's just he's more of an older fund. He has a specific investment style strategy that he doesn't call himself maybe a hedge fund outright. It's just Berkshire Hathaway. Sure, he's still a fund. He has his initial capital, Charlie's and the board members, and then they have outside investors in a fund that him and his team are managing. Not only are they managing money, they're going out and buying businesses. So not only is he investing the capital in a passive sense, he's actually going out and actively buying businesses as well. So he does do passive investments, but he also goes out and buys businesses as well. So maybe that's some type of good play or bad play. We're just going to talk about the fact that yes, they actually do hold tangible property as much as they hold passive investments. So when you see angels and VCs and just traditional funds, these people have diversified portfolios. Once again, when you're fully invested, you have a diversified portfolio. That's the difference. It's not that I'm going to go into all these different things to do. It's not necessarily that it's all these things to do because, I want to go into this, I want to go into that. The mentor said, dig your well before you're thirsty. So you got to dig your well before you're thirsty. So you dig one well at a time. You're talking to another senior the other day, and they said, you don't want to be the sun, you want to be a laser when it comes to accomplishing things. And we immediately knew what they were talking about. When your dream dies, you die. Fully invested. Hit the like and subscribe. Look forward to hearing from you. Christian at trustchristian.com. Once again, that's Christian at trustchristian.com. Peace. Enjoy.